The day my daughter-in-law filed for divorce was the same day I thought I had saved her life. That's the sentence that still rings in my head, even now. It comes back to me in the quiet moments, when the kettle whistles too long, when the house settles in the evening, when I fold laundry that used to belong to both of them and now belongs to only one. My name is Marjorie, and I am a mother long before I am anything else. A mother who has loved, supported, and in some ways protected her son far more than he ever realized. But this story, the one I'm about to tell, is not really about him. It's about her, my daughter-in-law, Lena. A young woman with soft brown eyes, a quiet voice, and a past she never wanted us to know. For 3 years, I believed I understood her. 3 years, I thought we were building some kind of mother-daughter peace, delicate as lace and just as fragile. 3 years I truly tried to love her, to help her, to stand with her when her own family would not. And then, the same week I pulled her out of a storm she said she couldn't survive, the same week I gave her my home, my hands, my heart, she handed my son divorce papers. No warning, no discussion, no crack in her voice when she told him. Only cold certainty, like she'd been planning it for months. And maybe she had, because when the truth finally surfaced, I realized I hadn't saved her at all. I had walked her right into the moment she'd been preparing for, a moment of revenge against a past we never knew she blamed us for. Before everything unraveled, my life was simple, quiet, predictable, filled with routines I didn't question. I woke each morning before the sun, like my mother did, and her mother before her. The house always smelled faintly of lavender oil I rubbed into the wood furniture every Sunday evening. The kitchen counters were warm honey oak, old but familiar, and my kettle lived permanently on the back left burner. Every other weekend, my son, Aaron, would stop by, sometimes alone, sometimes with Lena, sometimes not at all, depending on how busy work kept him. But he always called. He was that kind of son, the kind that said, "Love you, Ma," at the end of every phone call, the kind that still hugged me tight enough to lift my feet an inch off the ground. When he married Lena, I tried to keep my expectations low, not because I disliked her, but because I knew how fragile relationships between mothers and daughter-in-laws could be. The first time Aaron brought her home, she stood in my foyer, twisting her fingers together, her eyes darting around like she was afraid to touch anything. She thanked me 3 times for the glass of water I gave her. She apologized twice for taking up space. She was polite, almost too polite. Soft-spoken, almost to the point that I had to lean in to hear her. But she was gentle, and she loved my son in a way that made his shoulders relax and his laughter ring louder. So I welcomed her, wholeheartedly. Sunday dinners, game nights, holiday brunches, I tried to fold her into the rhythm of our family life. After their wedding, they moved into a small townhouse 15 minutes away, a cozy place with blue shutters and a garden Lena promised to grow herbs in. Life seemed calm, stable, uneventful. But sometimes, when I looked at her across the dinner table, I'd catch a flicker in her eyes, a shadow, a heaviness, something she carried but never spoke of. I told myself it was her past, whatever it was. I told myself she'd open up in time. I told myself we had years to build trust. And for a while, I believed that. I believed a lot of things. If you'd asked me back then what their marriage was like, I would have said, quiet but steady. Not perfect, no marriage is, but peaceful. But even peaceful homes have cracks. Lena was unpredictable at times. Not in a loud way, not in a dramatic way, but in a way that made you pause. She'd go silent in the middle of conversations. She'd flinch when someone knocked on their front door. She hated answering phone calls from unknown numbers. She once spilled coffee because a car backfired outside. And she never, ever talked about her mother. In 3 years, I never heard her mention the woman. Not her name, not her face, not a memory. When I asked gently one Thanksgiving, she said, "We're not close." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled so visibly that I changed the subject. Sometimes I wondered if Aaron ever asked. He brushed it off when I mentioned it. "Everyone has things they don't want to talk about," he said. "Let her be." So I did. For a while. But looking back, those were the first red flags. Not dramatic ones. No screaming, no cruel words, no broken plates. Just quiet, unsettling shifts in her mood. And walls she built without ever saying why. I used to think those walls were protecting her. I didn't realize she was using them to prepare something that would change all of our lives.
I always tell people that families aren't built in the big moments. They're built in the tiny, forgettable ones, the ones you hardly notice. The mornings when the floors creak under your slippers, the evenings when you sit around the same old table, sharing the same old stories with the same familiar voices. Peace, I've learned, is plain. It doesn't shout. It just hums quietly in the background of your days. And back then, before all the storms came, that's what my life felt like. A quiet hum. My name is Margaret, though most folks just call me Opal, and I had lived in the same brick house for nearly 30 years. Paint peeling on the back porch, a stubborn kitchen window that never quite closed right, and roses in the yard that bloom like they didn't care who noticed. That was home. My son, Daniel, lived 20 minutes away with his wife, Elena, in one of those beige townhomes that all look the same. He'd married young, right after his last semester of college. I remember the day he brought her to meet me. A soft-spoken girl with big brown eyes and hands that fidgeted with everything she touched. Her sleeves, her earrings, even the cuff of Daniel's coat. She looked nervous, but the kind of nervous that made you want to protect her, like a bird that had been taught to expect stones. Over time, our relationship settled into something warm, familiar. She'd come by on Saturdays, sometimes alone, sometimes with my son, always with that small smile that looked like a question. She was careful with everything. Her words, her movements, her gratitude. Most days, it felt like she lived in a world built on apologies. "Thank you for having us, Ma. I'm sorry the tea got cold. I hope I'm not in the way." If I told her she wasn't, she'd nod like she didn't believe it. Still, I loved her. Maybe a little more than I expected to. She seemed breakable. And I've always had this lifelong weakness for breakable things. Chipped mugs, old books, people with quiet voices. The truth is, I saw myself in her. Not the woman I am now, but the young one I once was. The one who married a man who wore his anger like a second skin. The one who learned early how to shrink without being told. The one who stayed too long. So perhaps that's why I treated her like more than a daughter-in-law. Why I stepped in when I didn't need to. Why I offered comfort before she asked. Why I hoped, foolishly, blindly, that she'd never have to fight the same battles I did. And back then, there were no signs of anything wrong. Daniel adored her. Or at least, he seemed to. He'd kiss the top of her head when she walked by. He'd rest his hand on her back when they stood side by side. If she forgot something, her phone, her keys, her train of thought, he'd just smile and say, "She's got a lot on her mind." It looked like love. It looked healthy. It looked ordinary. Sometimes, ordinary is the deepest camouflage. One evening, maybe 8 months into their marriage, they came over for dinner. I made baked chicken and green beans the way Daniel liked them, pan-seared with butter, just a little garlic. The house smelled warm, lived in, like thyme and toasted bread. I remember thinking as they walked in that nothing felt out of place. Elena brought a bowl of fruit salad she had made. She held it with 2 hands like it needed protecting. And when she set it on the table, she smoothed the plastic wrap 3 times before stepping back. "Looks delicious," I said. "Oh, it's nothing special," she murmured. That night was like 100 others. We ate, we talked about the weather. Daniel teased me about still using a landline. Nothing sharp, nothing strange, just a quiet family meal. But when they left, something lingered. something invisible, like the faint ache of an old wound. I couldn't place it then, but it sat with me, in the quiet, in the dark. A few weeks later came the first shift, a soft one, barely there. It was a Sunday afternoon. Church had just ended, and I decided to call my son. I dialed his phone twice before realizing the sound in the background, the muffled beeping, the faint intercom chimes, wasn't from him. It was from a hospital. I straightened in my chair. "Daniel? Are you all right?" He cleared his throat. "I'm fine, Mom. Just, Elena fainted at the grocery store. They're running tests. Nothing serious." My heart jumped into my throat. "Is she in pain? What did the doctors say?" "Nothing yet. They think it might be stress." Stress. The way he said it, flat, unbothered, made something tighten inside me. "Do you want me to come?" I asked. No, he said quickly. "We've got it handled." But something in his voice wasn't right. Something in his tone, too steady, too rehearsed, settled into my bones like a pinprick of cold. Later that week, I stopped by their house with groceries, just some soup, bread, a few things she liked. Elena answered the door with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her hair was tied back in a messy knot, and her eyes, those soft brown eyes, looked swollen, like she hadn't slept in days. "Oh, Opal, you didn't have to come," she whispered, stepping aside. "I know," I said gently, "but I wanted to." While she put the groceries away, I noticed her hands trembling. Not the jittery kind, the kind that happens after fear has drained out of you, leaving nothing but exhaustion. "Did the doctor say what caused the fainting?" I asked. She froze for half a second, just half, but I saw it. "Just stress," she said, too quickly, too tidy. Before I could ask more, Daniel walked in from the hallway. His smile was polite, too polite. His arms slipped around her shoulders with a stiffness I'd never seen. "We're fine now. Everything is normal." But everything wasn't normal. Not anymore. There it was. The first hairline crack. Small, quiet, almost dismissible. But once you've lived with cracks, real ones, painful ones, you can feel them even before they're visible. I didn't know then that this was only the beginning. Only the smallest tremor before the earthquake. Only the faintest whisper before the storm that would tear through all our lives.
I wish I could say I confronted Daniel that day, that I pulled him aside and asked what was happening behind those closed doors. But mothers, real mothers, know how fragile a grown child's pride can be. And Daniel had always been proud, too proud. So I went home that afternoon with my grocery bags a little lighter and my heart a little heavier. And in the days that followed, life seemed to slip back into its usual rhythm, at least on the surface. The truth, though? Once you notice one crack, you start seeing them everywhere. It began with small things, the kind that people shrug off because they're too subtle to call alarming. Like the way Elena's jokes changed. She used to laugh at herself, softly, like she didn't want to take up space with her joy. But now she laughed too quickly, too loud, like she was trying to prove something, like she was performing happiness instead of feeling it. Or the way she started canceling our Saturday visits, always with a polite, well-crafted excuse. "Oh, Mallory, I'm so sorry. I'm helping Daniel with a project today. I've got a headache. Maybe next weekend. Oh, we're reorganizing the spare bedroom. Daniel wants it done before Monday." It was always Daniel, always his needs, always his schedule. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to be the kind of mother-in-law who assumes the worst. Heaven knows I've heard enough horror stories to fill 5 lifetimes. So instead, I waited, watched, and prayed I was imagining things. But then came the shift in Daniel. He started calling less, visiting less. His voice, once warm and teasing, now sounded preoccupied, sharp around the edges, like he was always halfway through an argument I couldn't hear. One evening, I invited them over for dinner again, a simple meal, roasted vegetables, grilled fish, cornbread, comfort food. They arrived on time, but the second they walked into the house, I felt the air thicken. Daniel's jaw was clenched. Elena's smile was stretched thin, like a ribbon pulled too tight. When I hugged her, she stiffened just slightly, a barely there tension I felt more than saw. "Long day?" I asked gently. She opened her mouth to answer, but Daniel cut in. "Work's been crazy. We're both exhausted." The quickness of it, the way he swallowed the answer before she could speak. That's when I knew the balance in their home had shifted. A small shift, but a dangerous one. During dinner, the atmosphere was strained, but not openly hostile, the kind of tension that hides between words. Elena barely touched her food. She kept her fork in her right hand, but never lifted it. Every time Daniel looked her way, she straightened, like someone bracing for something. At one point, I asked her about her mother, a topic we hadn't discussed in months. I didn't mean to stir anything. I simply remembered her mentioning once that she hadn't spoken to her mother in years. "How's your mama? Any updates?" Her fork slipped from her fingers and hit the plate with a soft clink. Daniel shot her a look. Not angry, warning. She swallowed. She's fine," she said, her voice thin as paper. I felt the lie roll through the room like a cold wind, but again, I said nothing. Dinner ended, dishes were washed, and I walked them to the door. As I hugged Elena goodbye, Daniel rounded the corner first, stepping out onto the porch. She leaned closer, her voice barely audible. "Thank you," she whispered. "For dinner," she added quickly, louder, like she was afraid I'd misunderstand. But I didn't misunderstand, not one bit. Her gratitude wasn't for the meal. It was for the safety, for the few hours of peace she'd been allowed to feel. After they left, I stayed by the window, watching their car pull away. Daniel drove fast, too fast for someone supposedly exhausted. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. A creeping dread I had once known too well. The dread of secrets, the dread of unspoken things. For the next couple of months, life took on an uneasy rhythm. Not quite crisis, not quite normalcy. What I call the holding pattern, the stage people linger in before the truth begins to break open. Daniel became shorter-tempered, his visits sporadic. When he did show up, he talked mostly about work, about stress, about responsibility. But he never talked about Elena unless I asked. And Elena, she faded. That's the only word I have for it. She faded like a photograph left too long in the sun. Her eyes were tired, her smile slow to form. And every time she walked through my door, it felt like she was forcing herself to remember how to breathe. It was during one of those visits that I asked a simple question that changed everything. She had come over alone, the first time in a long while. Her hair was in a messy bun, strands falling out around her temples. Her shirt looked wrinkled, like she'd grabbed it off the floor. She sat at my kitchen table, holding a mug with both hands as though warming herself. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "are you all right?" She froze. Actually froze. Her eyes filled not with tears, but with panic. "I'm fine," she forced out. But she wasn't. She knew that I knew, and the moment she realized I could see through her, that I could see the truth she was trying so hard to hide, she reached for the safest lie she could find. "I'm just tired," she whispered. And that's when I understood. She wasn't allowed to be anything more than tired. Not sad, not hurt, not frightened, not angry, just tired. I recognized that restriction, that invisible leash. I'd lived with it once too. That day, after she left, I sat alone at my table long after her footsteps faded down my porch steps. I stared at my hands that once upon a time trembled the same way hers did. I should have acted then, should have asked more, pushed more, insisted. But I didn't. I told myself she'd talk when she was ready. I didn't know then that by the time she finally talked, by the time the truth clawed its way out, it would be far too late. Because the cracks were widening, the foundation shifting, the quiet tremors growing in the dark. The storm wasn't coming. It was already here. And we were all standing in it, pretending we couldn't feel the rain.
The next shift came on a Wednesday afternoon, one of those days where nothing in particular is supposed to happen. I was folding laundry, watching the sun slow dance through the blinds, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Daniel. Not a call, not a visit, just a text. "Mom, do you still have that old photo album from when I was little?" I stood there, towel in hand, staring at the message. It wasn't unusual, not by itself, but Daniel hadn't asked about childhood things in years. And something about the phrasing, it felt stiff, formal, like he was typing through a clenched jaw. I replied, "Yes, I do. Did you want to borrow it?" A few seconds passed before he responded, "Elena wants to see it." Not, "we want to see it." Not, "I want to show her." Elena wants to see it. I swear I felt something slide into place, something unsettling. Because in all the time I'd known her, Elena had never expressed interest in Daniel's childhood. Not like that. She'd seen pictures on my wall, seen Daniel's school trophies on my mantle, but she never asked about his Little League days, his scraped knees, or how he used to line up toy cars along the coffee table. Her silence about his childhood wasn't rude. It was understandable. Elena had never been nostalgic about childhood. In fact, she avoided the topic altogether, always insisting she preferred the present. But now, she suddenly wanted a photo album? "Sure," I texted back. "Come by anytime and pick it up." But they didn't come by. Not that day, not that week. 2 weeks later, I still had the album sitting by my living room lamp, waiting like an old friend eager to be remembered. Then another shift happened. This one, I felt it before I understood it. It was a Sunday afternoon when Daniel and Elena arrived unexpectedly. I was in the yard churning my rose bushes when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Daniel stepped out first, looking tight and strained. Elena followed, her posture careful, like she was trying to make herself smaller. "Hey, Mom," Daniel said. I wiped my hands on my apron. "Well, this is a surprise." "We were in the neighborhood," he said flatly. Elena didn't speak at first. She held her purse with both hands, fingers twisting the strap. She glanced at me, offered a small smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Come inside," I said, stepping back. The moment we entered the house, I felt an energy shift, like the air temperature dropped by a few degrees. Daniel stayed standing while Elena sank into the chair nearest the window. I came for the album," Daniel said. I nodded and handed it to him. But before he could open it, Elena reached out. Not quickly, not boldly, just steadily. "I want to see," she said. Daniel didn't look at her, didn't acknowledge the request. He just handed it over like he didn't care either way. That's when I noticed something. A bruise, faint but undeniable, near the base of Elena's thumb. Not a fall bruise, not a bump bruise, a grip bruise. I'd seen those before. She caught my eyes flicker to it, and she pulled her hand back instantly, folding it into her lap. She didn't say a word, but her eyes did. "Don't ask. Not here." She opened the album carefully, almost reverently. She touched the pictures lightly like they were fragile. The first page had Daniel's baby photos. Chubby cheeks, curls, big smile. "He was a happy child," I said softly. Daniel replied, uninterested. But Elena, she was looking at the pictures the way some people look at doorways they've never walked through, with longing, with grief, with something I didn't recognize at the time. "These are beautiful," she whispered. "You know," I said gently, "you've never asked about your own childhood photos." She flinched. Daniel shot me a look. Sharp, warning, territorial. "We don't need to get into that," he said tightly. I wanted to push. I didn't. Not then. "We should go," he said suddenly, snapping the album shut. They left within minutes, and I was left standing in my living room, staring at the empty chair where Elena had sat, feeling like something important had just slipped through my fingers. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the visit in my mind. Why the photo album? Why the bruise? Why the tension? But the question that weighed on me the most was this. Why did Elena look like she was searching the photographs for something Daniel didn't want her to find? That week, another change came. More subtle, but telling. Elena started visiting alone. Just once at first. She arrived on a Wednesday, holding a small container of soup. I made too much. she said, offering it with a soft, hesitant smile. Thought you might like some. But it wasn't the soup that caught my attention. It was her face. Her eyes looked swollen, like she'd cried recently. Her lips were pressed together in a way that told me she was holding something inside. Something heavy, something sharp. We sat at the table, sipping tea. She didn't say much, but when she stood to leave, I noticed a slight tremor in her hand when she picked up her purse. "Are you sure you're all right?" I asked gently. This time, she didn't freeze. She exhaled one long, shaky breath and said, "I'm managing." It wasn't an answer, not really, but it was the first honest word she'd spoken in months. The visits continued, once a week, sometimes twice. She never stayed long, but each time she came, she looked thinner, quieter, more drained. And each time, Daniel became more distant, more clipped, more irritable, more absent. One day, when he stopped by alone to drop off a package of mail, I asked, "Is everything okay at home?" He stiffened. "We're fine." "Daniel." "Mom, don't start." His voice had an edge I'd never heard before, an edge that scared me. But before I could say anything else, he walked away, closing the door harder than necessary. That night, an uneasy truth settled in my bones. Whatever was happening in their home, whatever was shifting, tightening, breaking, I was only seeing the surface. Something underneath was moving, and the cracks were widening, not just between them, but between all of us.
A frantic knock, a desperate knock. When you've lived long enough, you learn the difference. You learn how urgency sounds, how fear sounds. I set the book down, heart thudding, and moved to the door. When I opened it, Elena was standing there. Without a coat, without shoes, without her purse. Her socks were damp. Her hair was messy, not in that soft, lazy way, but in a way that said she ran without looking back. And her face, my God, her face. Her left cheek was swollen, red and raw. Her bottom lip was split on one side. There was a mark at the base of her jaw, like someone's fingers had pressed too hard. She looked like she'd been crying for hours, but the tears had dried into salt on her skin. "Elena," I breathed, reaching for her. She flinched, not from me, but from the movement. It broke something inside me. "Come in, baby, come in." She stepped in slowly, like each step hurt. The moment I closed the door behind her, her body sagged. Not collapsed, just sagged, like she'd been holding herself upright on pure will and finally ran out of strength. I guided her to the living room couch. She sat, breathing in sharp, shallow bursts, shoulders trembling. I didn't ask anything at first, didn't push, didn't probe. You don't interrogate a wounded creature. You offer warmth until the shaking stops. I grabbed a blanket and draped it around her shoulders. She clutched it, knuckles white, holding it the way a drowning person clings to the last piece of wood. "Do you want water?" I asked softly. She nodded, so I brought her a glass. Her hands trembled as she held it, and some spilled onto her lap. She didn't even react. When she finally looked at me, her eyes glistened with something deeper than pain. Shame. "I'm sorry," she whispered. My heart cracked. For what? For coming here like this? "Elena," I said firmly, sitting beside her, "you don't apologize for needing safety." A tear slid down her cheek, slow and heavy. She inhaled, sharp and broken, and whispered, "He hit me." The words landed like stones. I felt them in my chest, in my spine, in every part of me that had lived through similar storms decades ago.
But hearing those words from her, my daughter-in-law, my quiet, gentle Elena, was a different kind of heartbreak. "Come here," I murmured. She leaned into me, trembling. I wrapped an arm around her shoulders, holding her carefully so I wouldn't touch the swollen parts of her face. "It's never been this bad," she choked out. "Not like tonight." That was when I realized this wasn't the first time, not by a long shot. "What happened?" I asked gently, giving her the space to speak or stay silent. She pressed her hand against her forehead, as if trying to hold her thoughts in place. She began, voice quivering. "He was angry. I said something small, I don't even remember what, and he just snapped." Her voice broke. "He grabbed my arm. Then he shoved me, and then," she touched her lip lightly, "then he hit me." I closed my eyes for a moment, steadying my own breath. "Alina," I said softly, "has he ever—" "Yes," she whispered, "a few times. Little things." Little things. I felt heat rise in my chest, anger, grief, disbelief, all tangled together. "How long?" I asked. She didn't answer immediately. She looked down, fingers fidgeting with the blanket. "Since the wedding." Her voice trembled. "Maybe before." Before? Meaning he'd hid this from me? Hidden it well. Meaning she'd lived in fear for years, silently, right under my nose. "But why didn't you come sooner?" I asked, unable to stop the ache in my voice. She looked up at me then, eyes swollen, lashes clumped with dried tears, bruises forming like shadows across her skin. "Because I thought I deserved it." My breath caught. "No," I said immediately, firmly. "Absolutely not." "I know," she whispered, wiping at her cheek. "At least, I think I know now." I reached for her hand. "You did the right thing coming here." She squeezed my fingers, but her hand was ice cold. "I didn't know where else to go," she whispered. A beat passed, then another. Then the next question slipped out of her quiet, fragile, trembling. Do you think he'll come looking for me?" I inhaled slowly. "Yes," I said honestly. "I think he will." She swallowed, fear tightening her face. "But that doesn't mean you're going back," I continued. "Not tonight, not tomorrow, not until you're ready." "And if he demands I come back?" she whispered. I leaned closer, voice steady, voice strong. "Then he'll have to get through me first." That was the first time I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Not hope, not relief. Strength. A small spark, faint and shy but unmistakable. For the first time, she wasn't alone. After she showered and changed into some old, soft pajamas I found in my drawer, she sat on the edge of the guest bed. "May?" "Yes, baby?" "Thank you." I brushed a strand of damp hair from her forehead. I said, "You sleep now. We'll figure the rest out in the morning." But I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the hallway chair, listening to her breathing behind the door, watching the shadows move across the walls, and wondering, not for the first time, how my son became a man capable of this, and knowing this was only the beginning. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every time a car passed outside, my heart jumped. Every time the floorboards creaked, I tensed. I kept imagining Aaron's face. Not the little boy who used to hide behind my skirts during thunderstorms, but the man he had somehow become. A man who could raise his hand at his wife. I tried to push that thought away, but it hovered at the edge of everything, whispering dark truths. How did I miss it? How did I not see? At 6 a.m. sharp, the sky still gray, I heard the front door shake once, twice, loud enough to rattle the glass. I stood instantly, heart clenching. Another pound. And another. Then his voice, "Ma!" Not Mom. Not the gentle ma he used to say with a grin, but a sharp, angry bark. "Ma, open this door!" My pulse thrummed hot in my ears. I stepped into the hallway and glanced at the guest room door. Elena was awake. I could see the shadow of her feet under the crack, frozen. "Stay inside," I whispered through the door. "Don't come out unless I tell you." Silence. Then a small, trembling, "Okay." I inhaled, steadied myself, then opened the front door. Aaron stood there, disheveled, panicked, eyes bloodshot, chest heaving. He smelled of sweat and stress, and maybe faintly alcohol. "Where is she?" he demanded. No greeting, no explanation, just raw anger. "She's resting," I said, keeping my voice calm. "She left last night," he snapped. "We argued, yeah, but this is ridiculous. Tell her to come home." "No," I said quietly. His whole body stilled. "What? She's not going anywhere today." He stepped closer, jaw tight. "Ma, don't do this. Don't get involved." "I am involved," I said, "because she came to me." His nostrils flared. "She's being dramatic. You know how she gets." I felt a cold wave of disbelief wash through me. This boy, my boy, was trying to twist the truth right in front of me. "Aaron," I whispered, "she came here with bruises." He blinked. Once. Then scoffed. "Oh my God," he muttered, stepping back. "She's lying to you. I barely touched her." Barely. That word cracked something deep in my chest. "A marriage," I said slowly, "should never involve touching someone out of anger. Not even once." He dragged a hand over his face, frustrated. "Ma, please, she's manipulating you. She always does this. She twists things around, plays the victim." "Aaron," my voice cut through his excuses, sharp, unmoving. "Did you hit her?" His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "I didn't mean to. It just happened." I closed my eyes, pain spreading like heat through my ribs. "Go home," I said quietly. "Let her rest." He shook his head, anger rising again. "She's my wife, and she's safe here. You can't keep her from me." "I'm not keeping her from you," I said calmly. "She needs space and safety." He stared at me, fury twisting his features into something I didn't recognize. "You always take her side." "Last night she needed help, and I helped." His chest rose and fell in harsh breaths. He pointed at me, finger shaking. "You don't know everything, Ma. You don't know what she's done." "She told me enough." He laughed, short, bitter, ugly. "Of course she did." I stepped forward, lowering my voice. "Aaron, you need to leave before you say something you can't take back." For a moment, something like guilt flickered in his eyes. Just a flash. Then it was gone. "This isn't over," he muttered, and he turned and stormed down the steps, slamming his car door hard enough that the window rattled. I stood in the doorway long after he drove away. My legs were shaking. My palms were sweating. My heart was aching in a way I hadn't felt in years. When I finally closed the door, I leaned against it, waiting for my breath to catch up with me. Then I heard the guest room door creak open. Alina stood there in one of my old cotton robes, her hair damp around her face. Her eyes were red, but not from fresh tears, from listening. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You don't apologize," I said, shaking my head. "I didn't want to cause a fight," she murmured. "This wasn't a fight," I said softly. "It was the truth." She swallowed, her throat bobbing. "Do you think he'll be back?" "Yes," I said honestly, "but not today. Today he's lost in his own pride." She nodded, though her fingers twisted nervously. "Come on," I said gently. "Let's get some breakfast in you." We walked to the kitchen together. I made oatmeal with brown sugar and warm milk. She barely touched hers. At one point, she stared into her bowl and whispered, "I should have left sooner." "And yet," I said softly, "you left now. That counts for something." She nodded, but her shoulders stayed tense, as if waiting for the next blow, the next argument, the next disappointment, as if safety was temporary. As we sat there in silence, her spoon tapping the bowl, she whispered something so quietly I almost missed it. "He's not going to let me go." I set my spoon down. "You're not alone anymore, Alim. Her lips trembled. "Thank you," she whispered. But something about the way she said it, too soft, too flat, made me realize this wasn't just fear of going back. This was fear of what came next. Fear of decisions already forming in her mind. Fear of truths still hidden under everything she hadn't yet told me. And for the first time, I felt a shadow of suspicion. Not towards Aaron. I already knew my son was not the man I had believed, but towards her, towards the pieces she was still not sharing, towards the past she had always kept locked away, and the revenge she might now be quietly planning.
The rest of the morning passed in a careful kind of quiet. Elena stayed close to me, following me from room to room as I folded laundry, watered the plants, and dusted the shelves. She wasn't clingy, no, it was more like she didn't want to be alone with her thoughts. I recognized that feeling well. Sometimes silence is too loud. But there was something else, too. Whenever she thought I wasn't looking, she'd go still, eyes fixed on the middle distance, her fingers curling into the fabric of her robe, like she was mentally sorting through old drawers, deciding which memories to keep and which to burn, like she was planning something. By noon, she finally said she needed air, so we stepped onto the porch, mugs of warm tea in our hands. The sun was bright, but the air crisp, the way it gets before a spring knows if it wants to arrive or not. We sat on the porch swing. The chains creaked gently, a steady rhythm that had rocked many a story before this one. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then her voice broke the quiet like a thin thread snapping. "I'm scared of what he'll do next." "You're safe here," I said. "That's what scares me." She stared at her tea, her hands trembling slightly. "Because I feel safe, and I don't remember the last time I felt that. It makes everything else feel even worse." I turned toward her. "Elena, how long has this been happening?" She swallowed hard. "A year, maybe a little more." I felt the breath leave my lungs. A year. And she'd been smiling at every family dinner, bringing homemade bread for Thanksgiving, helping me pack gift baskets for the neighborhood charity, holding my hand while we prayed over meals. A whole year of pretending. "Why didn't you come sooner?" I whispered. "Because your son," she said, her voice breaking, "is very good at apologizing." That hurt, in a place I didn't even know existed until that moment. I didn't defend him. I couldn't. "He always promised it would be the last time," she continued softly. "And for a while, it would be. He'd be gentle again, loving. But it never lasted." I pressed my lips together, forcing the tears down. "And he said," she hesitated, eyes wet, "he said if I told you, you'd take his side." I felt anger rise, not hot and sharp, but cold and steady. "He doesn't know me as well as he thinks," I said. She gave a small, sad smile. "I know that now. For a moment, we simply breathed together. Tea steam curling into the air, the swing creaking gently, the world finally quiet. Then she whispered something that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I kept records, you know. My gaze snapped to her. What kind of records? She wrapped her arms around herself. Everything. Dates, times, pictures, messages. I saved it all. A shiver ran through me. Why? I asked quietly. She didn't hesitate. In case I needed to protect myself. There was something in her eyes, not fear, not anger, but a cold clarity I hadn't seen before. A woman who had hit her breaking point and stepped over it. Do you plan on using them? I asked. Her gaze drifted toward the yard, where the first brave little violet flowers were just pushing through the soil. If I have to. She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. We went back inside shortly after, and she excused herself to lie down. I made a small lunch, soup and buttered toast, and took it to her room, but she had already fallen asleep, curled tightly on her side. I watched her for a moment. She looked so young like that, too young for this kind of pain, too young for bruises hidden under long sleeves. I quietly closed the door. Then my phone chirped. A message from Aaron. We need to talk. I stared at the words, my stomach tightening. Before I could answer, another message arrived. I'm coming over later. My heart dropped. Later. Not, can I come? Not, is now okay. Just a statement. A warning. I typed back quickly. Not today. She's resting. 3 bubbles appeared. Then disappeared. Then appeared again. Finally. She is my wife. I have a right to see her. I closed my eyes, holding in the frustration. Another message. Don't make this harder, Ma. Harder. As if I was the problem, as if the bruises weren't proof enough of the harm he had done. I didn't answer. Not immediately. Instead, I walked to the window and pulled the curtain aside. The driveway was empty. The road was quiet. But something in my bones told me he wasn't going to wait. He wasn't going to listen. And when he came back, it wouldn't be for a conversation. It would be for control. I finally texted, if you come today, I won't let you inside. No response. Not a word. But the silence itself felt heavy, like a storm gathering behind the hills. I stood there a long time, watching the road, feeling the weight of what was coming. Because in every story like this, every breakup, every confrontation, every final straw, there is a moment when the person losing control decides to reclaim it, and they do not choose peaceful methods. Behind me, the old house creaked softly. A warning. A reminder. A promise. This was not over. Not by a long shot. That evening, the sky turned the color of a healing bruise. Violet fading into blue. Blue bleeding into gray. I remember thinking it was fitting. The whole world looked like it was holding its breath. Inside the house, everything was still. Elena was awake by then, sitting at the kitchen table with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She'd eaten most of the soup I left earlier, but her eyes were distant again, as if she'd traveled somewhere far and painful. When I told her Aaron had texted, she didn't speak at first. She just stared down at her hands. Finally, she whispered, "He's gonna come anyway." There wasn't fear in her voice. Not exactly. It was something else. Resignation, maybe. Or the exhaustion of someone who knows a storm is coming and is too tired to run anymore. I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "Sweetheart," I said softly, "you don't have to face anything you're not ready for." She took a long breath, then nodded, as if agreeing with a truth she didn't fully believe in yet. We sat there quietly, listening to the old kitchen clock ticking on the wall. I swear each tick sounded louder than the last. Tick, tick, tick. Then, a car door slammed. Both of us froze. Her eyes lifted to mine, wide and alert. I didn't have to look outside to know who it was. Aaron never knocked gently. He never announced himself kindly. He arrived. Heavy footsteps crunched over the gravel, then up the porch steps. A firm, angry knock rattled the door. Bam! 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 Elena flinched. I stood and placed a hand on her shoulder, reassuring but firm. You stay right here. Her fingers caught my sleeve, just for a second, then let go. I walked to the front door with measured steps, not rushed, not frightened, determined. When I opened it, Aaron stood on the porch with shoulders squared and jaw tight. His eyes flicked past me immediately, scanning the house like he had a right to every corner of it. Where is she? He snapped. I stepped into his line of sight, blocking the doorway. Lower your voice. I'm not here to fight, Ma, he said through clenched teeth. I just need to talk to her. No, I said calmly. Not tonight. He let out a short, humorless laugh. Huh, you're siding with her now. I'm protecting her, I replied. And who protected me when she ran to her mother behind my back, when she started talking to people about our marriage? You ever think of that? It was a strange thing. I should have felt defensive, maybe even guilty. But instead, I felt clarity, the kind that hurts. Aaron, I said slowly, your wife didn't run from love. She ran from harm. His expression hardened. Huh, so she's telling you her stories now, showing you bruises she probably made look worse? You really buying all of that? A coldness spread through my chest. I saw enough, I said, and I believe her. He stepped closer, anger radiating off him. She's my wife. You don't get to say that, I replied. If you treat her like she belongs to you instead of being married to you. His eyes narrowed. For a moment, there was something frightening in them, a calculation, a shift. Then, he tried to push past me, not roughly, but with entitlement. Like the house, the doorway, I belonged to him too. I placed both hands firmly against the doorframe, blocking him. No. He stared at me like he didn't recognize me. Move, he said. No, I repeated. For a second, the air between us tightened, then something in him snapped. Fine, he spat. Let her play the victim, let her hide here, but don't come crying to me when she turns on you too. She isn't turning on anyone, I said. She's trying to heal. Oh yeah? His lip curled. Is that what she told you? That she's the broken one? The way he said it, as if brokenness was weakness, as if vulnerability was manipulation, made my stomach twist. And then he said the part that chilled me. You think you're helping her, Ma, but you're just getting in the way. And I'm not letting anyone take my life apart. My son, I whispered, you already did that yourself. For a long moment, neither of us moved. He breathed heavily through his nose, eyes locked with mine, as if he was trying to read something. Fear, hesitation, submission. He found none. Finally, with a muttered curse, he stepped back. You're making a mistake, he warned. Then he turned and stomped down the porch steps. But when he reached his car door, he paused. His hand rested on the handle. His shoulders rose and fell once, and instead of leaving, he looked back at the house, back at the window where the warm kitchen light glowed, back at the place where he believed everything inside belonged to him. His voice came low, almost calm. This isn't over. Then he opened the door. But before he got inside, he said one more thing quietly, almost to himself. She wanted a war? Now she's going to get one. Then he drove off, taillights disappearing down the silent road. I stood in the doorway long after he was gone, trying to study my breathing. When I finally turned around, Elena was standing at the end of the hallway, small, fragile, wrapped in her blanket, eyes full of fear she couldn't put into words. I'm sorry, she whispered. I walked to her, took her face gently in my hands. Sweetheart, I said softly, you don't ever apologize for being hurt. Her eyes brimmed with tears. He's going to do something, she said. I know. Because deep in my bones, like a tremor before the earthquake, I felt it too. Aaron wasn't going to let this go, and whatever he was preparing for, it was only the beginning.
I didn't sleep that night. Not because of fear, though fear was certainly there, sitting heavy on my chest like a restless child, but because of what lived underneath it. A knowing. A mother always knows when something in her family is shifting, when a picture frame tilts before it falls, when the floorboards start to creak right before they crack. And something in Aaron's last look, the calm before a dangerous kind of storm, told me that a fracture had formed that we could no longer ignore. I sat in the living room until the early morning hours, wrapped in a shawl, listening to the house settle. The old walls groaned in that familiar way, like they were whispering prayers of their own. Around 4 a.m., Elena came out from the guest room. Her eyes were swollen, but she looked more rested than she had in days. You didn't sleep, she murmured. I smiled softly. I was keeping watch. She sat on the couch beside me, drawing her knees up to her chest. The blanket she carried puddled around her like a soft shield. I never wanted any of this, she whispered. I know. No, I mean, she swallowed, voice trembling. I didn't want it to get this far. I didn't want to be the reason you and Aaron fight. You've always been good to me. Baby, I said gently, you aren't the reason for anything. People create their own consequences. Her lip trembled, and a tear rolled down her cheek before she could stop it. I kept hoping he would stop. My heart cracked a little at those words, because that's what victims say. That's what women who have been broken quietly for years whisper when they finally begin to unravel. I know, I whispered, and he should have. We sat there quietly for a while, the only sound the soft ticking of the antique mantel clock. After a long moment, she asked, Do you think he'll come back? I took a slow breath. Yes, I said truthfully, but we'll be ready. Her shoulders slumped in relief and fear all at once. Ready. The word sounded stronger than I felt. The sun rose slow and pale through the kitchen window. I made oatmeal with cinnamon and a splash of vanilla, something warm to ground us both. While we ate, Elena stared down at her bowl, stirring more than eating. Finally, she said quietly, I should tell you something. I set my spoon down. She looked up, her eyes hollow in a way I didn't understand yet. Her voice was soft, so soft it almost disappeared. He's not angry because I left. He's angry because I left too early. I didn't speak. I let her work through the knot in her throat. She continued, I wasn't supposed to leave until after Christmas. I wasn't supposed to say anything yet. I messed up his plan. His plan? I echoed carefully. She nodded. This wasn't spontaneous. He had a timeline, a schedule. She let out a shaky breath, and I ruined it. I sat up straighter. Elena, I said slowly, what plan? She stared at the table for a long moment, as if deciding whether to open the box or keep it shut. When she finally lifted her eyes, they were full of shame and fear and something deeper, something like a confession. He wanted me to go back to my mother so she could fix me. That's what he said, fix me. Her voice trembled. And he said once I came back with the right attitude, we'd try again. My body went still. She continued, he said he just needed a few months to get things in order. He said life wasn't working with me the way I was. He said if I didn't change, he would replace me. The silence that followed was ice cold. Replace you, I repeated under my breath, tasting the ugliness of it. Elena nodded. He already had someone lined up. That hit the table like a rock thrown into still water. Everything inside me stilled. You're saying, yes, she whispered, voice breaking. He was grooming her, a woman from his job, someone younger, someone he said wouldn't give him trouble. A sour taste filled my mouth. And your trip to your mother, he wanted time to start transitioning her into my place. He didn't even hide it at the end. He said if I didn't behave, if I didn't stop embarrassing him, he'd have a wife who knew how to act. My chest tightened painfully. He told me that if I ruined his plans, I'd regret it. I reached across the table and took her hands. You don't have to be afraid anymore. But I am, she whispered, because when I left early, I didn't just interrupt his plan. Her voice dropped lower. I humiliated him. The word hung heavy between us. Men like Aaron didn't tolerate humiliation. Men like him didn't forgive it. I took a deep breath. Elena, I said firmly, you did the right thing. She let out a hollow laugh. Then why does doing the right thing feel like waking a sleeping monster? I squeezed her hand. Because sometimes it does. That afternoon, while Elena was taking a shower, my phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Aaron. My stomach nodded. Aaron, I'm coming over tonight. She doesn't get to hide behind you. I'm getting my wife back. 5 seconds later, another message. Aaron, and if she won't come home willingly, fine, we'll do this my way. My way. Those 2 words chilled me more than anything else. I took a slow breath, set the phone down, and leaned my palms on the countertop. The truth was settling now, crystallizing like frost on a window pane. Aaron wasn't coming to talk. He wasn't coming to reason. He wasn't coming to reconcile. He was coming to reclaim, to control, to punish. And as much as I loved my son, I knew in my heart that if I let him through my door that night, if I let him anywhere near that vulnerable woman in my house, I would become part of the violence he'd already started. I straightened my shoulders. Tonight would be different. Tonight he would not enter my home, not as a son, not as a husband, not as a man trying to enforce his will. Tonight, a line would be drawn. A line between what he believed he owned and what I would protect with every breath I had.
Even as the sun dipped low behind the trees, painting the sky in bruised purples and oranges, my heartbeat refused to settle. Every tick of the clock was louder than the last, a warning drumbeat in the quiet house. Elena sat across from me in the living room, her knees drawn to her chest, blanket pulled tight around her shoulders. Her eyes darted to every shadow, every slight movement of the curtains. She could feel it too, the electricity of a storm about to hit. I think he's on his way, she whispered. I nodded slowly. Then we prepare. I didn't mean weapons. I didn't mean yelling. I meant calm, control, boundaries. 2 things Aaron had never respected. By 6 o'clock, the sound of a car engine echoed in the driveway. My stomach turned into a knot. I told Elena to stay inside, in her room, and I went to the front door, my hands steady, my heart thundering. The moment I opened it, Aaron's eyes met mine, sharp, cold, and accusing. I could see that same arrogance that had lured my son into blind trust all these years. "Mom," he said, a fake sweetness dripping from his words, "I just want to talk." I didn't move. I didn't invite him in. My voice was calm but unwavering. "You'll not come in here tonight." His smile twisted. "And why is that?" "Because I said so," I answered, letting the weight of those words fall between us like stones. His hand twitched, almost imperceptibly, as if he wanted to reach out, to grab control, to assert dominance. But I wasn't my son.
I wasn't going to hand him the stage. "I'm not leaving without her," he said, voice lowering, dangerous now. "She's my wife." I let out a quiet, deliberate laugh. "Your wife? That word doesn't give you a free pass to terrorize anyone, Aaron. She's not a possession. And you," I paused, letting each word land like a hammer strike, "are not coming in here." His jaw tightened. I could see the anger pooling behind his eyes, the kind of rage that only comes from someone used to having everything bend to their will. He took a step forward. I planted myself firmly in the doorway. "One more step," I said softly, but my eyes held steel, "and I call the police." For a long moment, he froze. Then he sneered, retreating a step, muttering under his breath. I could hear the words even through the cold air outside. "You think you can stop me?" I didn't respond. I just closed the door slowly, locking it behind me. The sound echoed in the hallway, final and decisive. Elena emerged from her room, hands trembling. She started, voice quivering. "He came here, but you stopped him." I pulled her close. "I will always stop him. Do you understand that?" She nodded against my chest, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I was so scared. I thought I had to go back. I thought I'd failed everyone." "Baby," I whispered, stroking her hair, "you didn't fail. You survived. That's what matters. You made it through." And in that moment, I realized something crucial. Protecting her wasn't just about keeping Erin out. It was about giving her the courage to reclaim herself, to understand that her life belonged to her, not to him. That night, I called a lawyer. I didn't tell Elena, just moved in silence, preparing the house, gathering documents, making sure we had a safe line to the authorities if Erin tried anything again. We installed new locks, and I spoke to neighbors, subtly warning them, not to gossip, not to provoke him, but to keep a watchful eye. Elena began to breathe more freely. Her trembling lessened. The first time she smiled, even slightly, I felt a small victory bloom in my chest. But deep down, I knew Aaron wasn't finished. Men like him don't forgive easily. They plan, manipulate, and wait. And he had already proven he was capable of anything to regain control. 3 days later, a letter arrived, hand-delivered to the porch. I recognized the writing immediately. Neat, calculating. Aaron's signature style. I opened it carefully. The words were meant to intimidate. "You've interfered with something bigger than you understand. Let her go or you'll regret it. I always get what I want." I felt a flicker of fear, yes, but it was tempered by a growing resolve. This was no longer just about Aaron or Elena. It was about standing up for what was right, about teaching a man who had grown up thinking power could intimidate, that there are lines he cannot cross. I showed the letter to Elena. She read it quietly, her hands shaking. "We'll show him he doesn't get to frighten us," I said gently. "Not anymore. We'll be careful, yes, but we won't hide." She nodded, wiping her eyes. I think I understand now. I don't have to be afraid." And in that moment, I realized the first real step to freedom is believing you deserve it. The storm was not over, not by a long shot. But the first line had been drawn, the first boundary set, and I knew, deep in my bones, that from here on, we would not be stepping back. We would not be silent. We would not be intimidated. Because now, we had each other. And sometimes, That is all you need to face the kind of darkness you never thought you could survive.
The night after Aaron's letter, sleep refused to come. I sat by the kitchen window, hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the quiet of the neighborhood, but the house itself felt charged, like the air before a storm breaks. Alana came downstairs, bare feet padding softly against the hardwood. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but there was determination in her posture I hadn't seen before. "I don't want to be scared anymore," she said quietly. "You won't be," I promised, my voice calm, steady. "But first, we need to understand him. We need to see clearly who we're dealing with." I'd known Aaron for years. He was charming, charismatic even, but underneath it all, he was controlling, manipulative, and dangerous in ways my son never seemed to notice. But now, standing in that kitchen with Alana, I realized just how deep the deception went. The next morning, I began going through small details that had always seemed insignificant. Phone records, emails, the subtle inconsistencies in Alana's stories when she thought no one was listening. At first, I found nothing. Then, buried in the digital clutter, I found a pattern. A series of interactions between Aaron and someone else, someone who had helped him cover his actions, someone who had been feeding lies. I didn't speak immediately, I just kept reading, piecing it together quietly while Alana practiced breathing exercises in the living room. The truth, when it finally revealed itself, hit like a brick. Aaron had never wanted reconciliation, never wanted a normal marriage. Everything, every kind word, every apology, every small gesture meant to lull my son and us into a false sense of trust. He had been planning, calculating, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And Alana? She had been caught in the middle from the start. I felt my stomach twist, a mixture of anger, heartbreak, and protectiveness. The betrayal wasn't just his, it was the illusion he had created around all of us. I found Alana in the garden, the first light of dawn brushing her face with soft gold. She was watering the flowers, trying to calm herself, but her hands shook. "Alana," I said softly, kneeling beside her, "we need to talk about what I found." She looked up at me, eyes wide, vulnerability etched deep in her features. I know, I've been afraid to see it." "You don't have to be afraid anymore," I said, taking her hands in mine. "He's not going to control you, not tonight, not ever, but you need to understand everything so you can make the choices that protect you." Her tears fell freely. I thought I loved him. I thought maybe he could change." I shook my head slowly, my thumb brushing against her palm. Sometimes love isn't enough to save you from someone's cruelty. And sometimes the person you trust the most is the one hiding the deepest secrets. That's not your fault. We sat together in silence, the garden alive with the morning sounds of birds and leaves rustling in the wind. In that quiet, I realized something powerful. Alana wasn't weak. She had been naive, yes, and manipulated, but she wasn't broken. She could rebuild. She would rebuild. By the end of the week, we had mapped out a strategy. Not revenge, nothing reckless, but a careful reclaiming of autonomy. First, we documented everything. Every threatening text, every lie, every interaction that painted a clearer picture of Aaron's intent. Then, we reached out to a lawyer who specialized in domestic manipulation and custody matters. Alana was terrified at first. "What if he fights back?" she asked. I held her close. "Then we stand together. And remember, you're not alone. You have me. You have the law on your side. And most importantly, you have your own strength, which he can never take away." Then came the small but crucial steps: changing passwords, securing accounts, creating safe lines of communication, and notifying friends and family who could be custodied. Every move was deliberate, every step a small victory against the shadow he had cast over our lives. But just as we thought we were making progress, another layer unfolded. A conversation with one of Aaron's former colleagues revealed something that stopped me cold.
He had been planning this divorce months in advance. Months. Every apology, every attempt at reconciliation, every smile he had shown my son and our family, it had been an act. And more shocking, the reconciliation with his own estranged mother? That was part of his plan too. He had used it as leverage, a way to gain sympathy, to manipulate Elena into trusting him, and to set the stage for humiliation and betrayal. I felt my anger boil over, but I forced it down. Rage would not help us. Strategy, clarity, and courage. That would. I looked at Elena, standing beside me, and knew one thing with certainty. She had to see this truth, feel it, and then rise above it. That evening, I sat Elena down in the living room, documents spread out between us like a battlefield map. I said, "Look at this," I said gently. "Every step he has taken, every lie he has told, it's all here. And now you have the power to decide what happens next." Her eyes widened as she read. Then, slowly, a hard edge formed in her expression. I won't let him do this. I can't. I won't be afraid anymore." I smiled, squeezing her hand. "That's my girl. The world can try to scare you, to manipulate you, but it will never own you. Not while you know your worth, not while you fight for yourself." In that moment, I realized something profound. Courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is standing up in spite of it. And Elena was standing. The storm wasn't over, but for the first time, we weren't hiding. We were ready to face it head on.
The following morning, Elena and I woke with a shared sense of purpose. The air in the house felt different, lighter somehow, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the tension and finally released it. I brewed coffee, the smell strong and earthy, and we sat at the kitchen table, documents stacked neatly, pens ready. Today, we would no longer be passive observers in Aaron's twisted game. "Are you ready?" I asked, my voice steady but soft. Elena nodded. Her hands gripped the mug like it was a lifeline. I've never been more ready in my life. Our first move was legal. We scheduled a meeting with our attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Gloria, whose reputation for dismantling manipulative ex-spouses preceded her. She didn't sugarcoat anything. "From what you've presented, Aaron has a clear pattern of psychological manipulation," Gloria said, flipping through the files. "He's trying to control the narrative. But we can counter it. The key is timing, evidence, and public perception." I glanced at Elena. Her eyes were wide, absorbing every word. I knew the truth. We had to act deliberately. Anger was dangerous. Clarity was power. Gloria outlined a plan. We would file protective legal motions, secure communication channels, and prepare for any attempts Aaron might make to twist the story. She emphasized documenting everything, meticulously, every message, every interaction. Nothing would be left to chance. Over the next few days, we methodically executed the plan. We compiled emails, screenshots, voicemails, anything that reflected Aaron's manipulation. Each piece of evidence was a reminder Elena was not imagining it. She had been carefully deceived, yes, but now the scales of truth were tipping. Even as we worked, Elena's transformation was remarkable. I watched her reclaim her agency in quiet, powerful ways. She started setting boundaries, refusing calls from people connected to Aaron, and speaking her mind without hesitation. One evening, she paused while reviewing an email thread. "I can't believe I let him make me doubt myself for so long," she said softly. I reached over, squeezing her shoulder. "You were learning. Manipulation isn't obvious at first, but now you know, and that knowledge is your shield." The first confrontation with Aaron came sooner than expected. He called, pretending innocence, trying to charm her and to twist her into doubt. His voice was smooth, practiced. "Why are you listening to your mother? I'm trying to fix this," he said, a subtle edge of irritation hidden behind the honeyed tone. Elena didn't flinch. "You've never tried to fix anything, Aaron. You've only ever tried to control it, and I see that now." I listened silently from the other room, heart pounding but proud. That was the turning point, the moment she stopped being a victim and started being a strategist.
He sputtered, faltered, then hung up. Elena exhaled slowly, a mix of relief and triumph washing over her. "You handled that beautifully," I said. She smiled faintly, almost shyly. "I think I finally understand what freedom feels like." Next, we quietly reached out to trusted friends and family. The goal wasn't to spread gossip or humiliation, but to build a support network that could validate the truth if Erin tried to manipulate public perception. Some were skeptical at first, unable to reconcile the charming persona Erin presented with the reality we described. But as Elena presented evidence calmly and deliberately, their doubts faded. One by one, they pledged support, offering everything from legal advice to emotional backing. The most moving moment came when my son, Erin's brother, stepped forward. He admitted he'd suspected something wasn't right, but didn't want to interfere. Now seeing Elena armed with truth and courage, he promised to stand by her. "It's time he faced reality," he said quietly, voice filled with both sorrow and resolve. Weeks of preparation culminated in our first official legal action. Protective motions were filed, emails submitted, and witnesses contacted. Every step was painstaking, meticulous, and emotionally draining, but the results were immediate. Erin's attempts to manipulate Elena through threats and guilt failed. The court recognized the pattern of coercion and manipulation, granting her temporary protections and control over communication channels. For the first time, she was truly safe, not just physically, but psychologically. That evening, I watched her sit in the living room, staring at the ceiling, letting the relief wash over her. "I can breathe again," she whispered. "Yes," I said, my hand resting on hers. "And you will keep breathing, stronger every day." Through all of this, I reminded Elena constantly, power isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming your life. It's about asserting your dignity, showing the world and yourself that you will not be bullied, manipulated, or silenced. Erin, no matter how devious, had underestimated one thing: the quiet strength of someone who has been hurt, learned the truth, and refuses to be a victim anymore. Elena's resolution inspired me too. I'd spent so long protecting her, sometimes questioning whether my interventions were right. Now, watching her navigate this carefully, I understood something crucial. Sometimes helping someone isn't about saving them. It's about guiding them to see their own strength. The road ahead was still uncertain. Court dates loomed, Erin's reactions could be unpredictable, and emotional scars remained. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt hope. Not naive hope, but steady, grounded hope. Elena was no longer a shadow under his control. She was standing firmly in her own light, ready to reclaim her life, dignity, and happiness. And I would be there, quietly, proudly, guiding her, reminding her that even after the deepest betrayal, resilience can bloom. The storm hadn't fully passed, but for the first time, we weren't running from it. We were walking through it together.
The day it all went public, I remember waking to the sound of the morning news blaring in the background. The headline was subtle but unmistakable. "Family feud turns legal. Allegations of manipulation and coercion in high-profile divorce case." I paused, spoon hovering mid-air over my oatmeal, and felt the room shrink around me. Elena sat across from me, her face calm, but her hands clenched tightly in her lap. She was ready. I could see it in her eyes. "You ready?" I asked quietly, knowing that this was more than just a court case. It was the moment the world would see Erin for who he really was. "I think I am," she said. Her voice held a tremor, but also steel. We had prepared for this day meticulously, anticipating the whispers, the sideways glances, the judgment. But nothing had prepared me for the feeling of walking into a room full of people who didn't know our truth, but who would see it unfold. The courtroom was packed, family, acquaintances, even a few strangers drawn by curiosity. Erin arrived with his usual charm, a carefully practiced smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. I watched Elena, standing tall, carrying herself with a confidence I had never seen before. When the attorney called her to the stand, she didn't hesitate. She recounted the manipulations, the gaslighting, the subtle cruelty that had been disguised as love.
Every word was measured, precise, and backed by evidence. Aaron's face paled in ways I had never imagined. For the first time, he was no longer in control. Family members who had been silent or hesitant stepped forward once the truth became undeniable. My son's brother, who had once only watched quietly, gave testimony that corroborated Elena's story. "I saw her struggle," he said firmly, "and I saw him twist her reality. She's telling the truth." Even extended family members who had taken Aaron's side initially were forced to confront the reality. The quiet murmurs of disbelief filled the room. It was satisfying, yes, but more importantly, it was vindicating. Not for revenge, but for justice. News outlets and social media picked up the story almost immediately. Headlines tried to sensationalize it, but the evidence spoke louder than speculation. People began reaching out to Elena, sharing their own experiences of manipulation and abuse. One email stayed with me long after. "I saw your story and it gave me the courage to speak up. Thank you for showing me that I am not alone." I passed it to Elena and she read it out loud, voice shaking. "All this pain, maybe it wasn't for nothing," she said. I nodded, tears brimming. "It was never for nothing. It's for you, for us, and for anyone else who needs to see that truth matters." As the days went on, Aaron's charm and control unraveled completely. Business partners distanced themselves, friends turned away, and even casual acquaintances began questioning the man he pretended to be. It was not my satisfaction that drove me, it was relief. Relief that Elena was finally free from the invisible chains he had wrapped around her mind. Relief that the truth, painstakingly documented and shared, had reached the people who needed to see it. Aaron tried to fight it, of course. There were moments of rage, desperate attempts to twist the narrative back in his favor. But by this time, Elena had grown impervious. The fear that once held her silent had been replaced by clarity, preparation, and unwavering self-respect. Friends and neighbors, once unsure how to respond, now offered their support openly. Invitations for gatherings, coffee, and quiet check-ins came flooding in. People wanted to be part of her healing, to witness her strength, and to celebrate her courage. Even in the public sphere, Elena remained poised. No dramatics, no loud proclamations, just calm, measured courage that commanded respect. It struck me then how true power often isn't loud. It's quiet. It's steadfast. It's holding your head high when the world doubts you. Watching Elena navigate this, I understood something important. Sometimes justice isn't about vengeance, and sometimes closure doesn't come from seeing someone punished. Closure comes from reclaiming your own life, from stepping into the light when you've been cast in shadows, from choosing dignity over rage, strength over bitterness, and clarity over confusion. I felt that lesson deeply too. I had worried that my role in this, my attempts to help her reconcile with her mother, might have backfired. But the truth was, it had prepared her to face Aaron with courage. My guidance had given her the foundation to navigate the storm, and that mattered far more than any fleeting satisfaction of getting back at him. That evening, we sat on the porch, a soft breeze carrying the faint scent of blooming jasmine. Elena sipped her tea, and I watched her exhale, letting go of months of tension. "I can finally see a future without fear," she said, voice soft but sure. "Yes," I replied, "and that future is yours to build, strong, unbroken, and full of possibility." She smiled, not just at me, but at the life she was about to reclaim. I realized then that the journey hadn't been about punishment. It had been about awakening, about finding strength and truth, and about knowing that even after betrayal, one could rise. The world had witnessed her story, but the most important part, her freedom, her voice, her courage, was hers alone. The weeks after the public reckoning were quieter than I expected, but not empty. There was a strange kind of calm that settled over our lives, the kind that comes after a storm passes and the air feels sharp, clean, and new. Elena had moved into her own apartment by then, a small space with sunlight streaming through the windows, carrying the smell of fresh coffee and polished wood. She decorated it simply, with plants and a few framed photos, proofs of life, proof of love, proof that she had survived. I visited often, not because she needed me, but because I wanted to witness her healing.
and each time I saw it, a steady rise from the chaos Erin had left behind. One of the hardest parts was watching her rebuild relationships that had been strained or broken. Her mother, the woman she had once feared facing, began to show up in small ways. Calls, texts, quiet gestures of support. Elena, cautious but open, started to allow trust to grow again. "You were right," she said to me one afternoon as we sipped tea in her sunlit kitchen. Reconnecting with her, it gave me perspective. I needed that before I could truly leave Erin behind. I nodded, remembering the long nights I had spent encouraging her, holding back tears of worry, and praying she would see the light she had deserved all along. Healing, I realized, wasn't a single act. It wasn't just leaving Erin or winning the case. It was quiet mornings like this. It was laughter without fear. It was reclaiming small joys that had once seemed impossible. Elena started painting again, something she had abandoned years ago when Erin's criticism had chipped away at her confidence. She hung her canvases proudly, each stroke a testament to survival. "You see this?" she asked, pointing to a vivid sunset she had painted. "I painted it for me, not for anyone else." I smiled, heartful. That was the essence of her journey. Not revenge, not public approval, but claiming her own life, her own light. She also began sharing her story with others. Quietly at first, then more publicly. She reached out to women's groups and support networks. Her story, once private and shame-filled, became a beacon. "People need to see that it's possible," she told me during a phone call one evening. "They need to know that leaving doesn't make them weak. It makes them human. Strong humans." I felt a swell of pride, not pride in what we had exposed about Erin, but pride in her resilience, in her ability to transform pain into empowerment. Life wasn't perfect. There were still moments of doubt, pangs of grief, and memories that clung stubbornly, but they no longer controlled her. Elena learned to walk through them, not around them. We shared quiet dinners, laughter that came easily now, and conversations that ran deep into the night. She began volunteering at a local community center, helping women navigate legal and emotional challenges. Each success, each smile she brought to someone else felt like a quiet victory over the shadow Erin had cast. One evening, as we watched the sun dip behind the city skyline from her balcony, she said softly, "I feel free, really free, for the first time in years." And I realized that those words, simple and powerful, were the truest measure of all our struggles. Freedom wasn't about punishment, it was about life. I too had changed. I had learned the delicate balance between helping and overstepping, between trusting someone's journey and imposing my own timeline. My loyalty to my son had been tested, my sense of moral duty questioned, but ultimately I understood that true support sometimes meant stepping back, allowing the person to choose their own path, even when it was painful. Watching Elena reclaim herself reminded me of the moral at the heart of all my stories. Kindness is not weakness, empathy is not surrender, and helping someone does not guarantee the outcome you expect. Life moves in its own rhythm, and our role is to guide, not dictate. Months later, the divorce was finalized. Erin faded from our lives, replaced not by bitterness, but by a sense of closure. Elena's apartment hummed with life, her laughter spilling through the walls. She had started dating again, cautiously, mindfully, aware now of her boundaries. She spoke of the future with hope, not fear. And I, quietly observing, felt the warmth of relief, pride, and gratitude. We had weathered storms, witnessed betrayal, and survived heartbreak. And through it all, we had found our footing, our voice, and our strength. I sometimes think back to the week I first encouraged Elena to reach out to her mother, the same week she filed for divorce. It had seemed like a betrayal at first, a cruel twist of fate. But now I see it differently. Every moment, even the painful ones, led her to this place of clarity and power. Life is messy, relationships are complex, and intentions are not always transparent. But through patience, empathy, and unwavering moral courage, healing is possible. And freedom, real freedom, can be claimed, not given, not demanded, but earned through truth and perseverance. As I sit here reflecting on all that has transpired, I feel an overwhelming sense of calm. The chaos has passed, the storm has ended, and what remains is life. Full, vivid, and beautiful. Life has a way of testing us in ways we never anticipate. We open our hearts, offer our hands, and sometimes the very people we try to help hurt us the most. But that does not mean we stop helping. That does not mean we stop caring. Watching Elena reclaim her life reminded me that strength is not measured by how we fight others, but how we rebuild ourselves. It is in the quiet mornings, the small victories, the courage to face pain and still choose hope. It is in knowing that even betrayal can teach us lessons about empathy, resilience, and love. I ask you, dear listener, have you ever extended trust or kindness only to feel it betrayed? How did you respond? Did you retreat? Or did you find a way to let your heart heal, even when it hurt? Remember, the people who wrong us are only a part of our story. We are not defined by their actions. We are defined by how we rise, how we care for those who need us, and how we reclaim joy after the storm. If this story resonated with you, or if you've walked a similar path, share your thoughts, your heart, your lessons, because in these shared moments, we find connection, healing, and the quiet strength to move forward. Would you have done what I did? Tell me in the comments. And if you've been inspired by stories of courage, resilience, and reclaiming life, consider subscribing and supporting these stories, because every shared voice is a reminder that we are never truly alone.